Within ICE, I am going to create a new special deportation task force focused on identifying and quickly removing the most dangerous criminal illegal immigrants in America who have evaded justice, just like Hillary Clinton has evaded justice, okay? Maybe they'll be able to deport her.
There he was last night in Phoenix, Donald Trump going after Democrats, but also explaining in more detail than he has before his immigration agenda, including a 10-point plan. So how did he do? Will he work with voters and do his ideas make sense? We've got a great political panel this morning on this question. U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce President and Clinton surrogate Javier Palomares, along with Libre Initiative spokeswoman Rachel Campos Duffy, and Boris Epshteyn, who is a senior advisor to the Trump campaign. Javier, to you first. I thought he made a really interesting point last night about legal immigration and about our right to choose who comes here. Here's part of what Trump said.
It's our right as a sovereign nation to choose immigrants that we think are the likeliest to thrive and flourish and love us.
So you're a business guy. You wouldn't hire the first 100 people who showed up for the job interview.
Absolutely.
You reserve the right to choose the ones you want.
Agree.
Why shouldn't our country have that same right? That's not how we do it now.
Right. You know, I don't think anybody's advocating to hire just whoever shows up here. The vast majority of immigrants that are here came here to look for work.
Right.
The vast majority of them, in fact, are working and helping this nation move forward. They're doing the kinds of jobs, frankly, that a lot of Americans would not do.
Okay, but Rachel, why wouldn't our immigration policy be a little bit more thoughtful? It was designed when we had an industrial economy. We no longer do. So why shouldn't we say we're going to take people who are going to help us in very specific ways, not just people who have family here or who are close by physically, but people who are going to help us?
We talked about welcoming people who want to assimilate, who love America, who share our values. I think that bodes really well for Hispanic immigrants, frankly, when you compare it to immigrants from other countries, and you see the problems going on in Europe with trying to assimilate some of their migrant population. So I don't think that this necessarily bodes poorly for Hispanic immigrants, who I think come here, work hard, just as Javier said.
And I think most people think that, and I think Trump kind of said that last night for the first time. But why not have a skills-based immigration system?
It's absolutely necessary. And then this actually hits close to home for me. My family, we're immigrants. We came here when I was 11. My father's an applied math PhD. You better believe that if that were not the case, we would have had a harder time getting into this country than we did. And it was, you know, we were vetted for several years, went through a long process, and that did play a big role. So I do believe, just like hiring for a business, as a businessman, we should be looking at the backgrounds, but also the skill sets of everyone coming in. That's just common sense. That's the kind of common sense Donald Trump brings into this country.
It needs to be modernized to work for our economy, and I don't think anyone's arguing that.
No, lots of people are arguing that. They're arguing that the main criterion ought to be, do you have relatives in the United States?
But one of the things that I have to do, listen, I like the speech. I think, you know, I'm an American before I'm a Hispanic, and I definitely think the idea of making a system that works for Americans first matters and is important. I think that was a great point that he brought up, and he was very unapologetic about it, and I was proud of that. One thing he did not address is that there are many, he said he wanted to put Americans first. He didn't talk specifically about the so-called dreamers. They are Americans. They do live here, and we need something. He didn't really talk about, he talked about getting rid of the executive actions that Obama put in place that allowed their parents to stay. I think that Trump really should have talked about pushing legislation to allow them, not through executive orders, but through legal, you know, in the House,
through the Congress.
Through the Congress.
It's one speech. You're not going to lay out every single
I understand, but that's a very important point.
He talks a lot about the wall, and he's being scoffed at by all the smart people. All the cool kids are unimpressed by the wall. What's the argument against protecting the country with the wall?
I don't think there is an argument, and there should never be an argument against protecting our country. We have every right to do exactly that. The fact of the matter is, though, that the wall is one element. That's one thing. Right. This country has many, many, many challenges. Immigration reform, at least in the eyes of my constituency of 4.1 million Hispanic-owned firms in this country that collectively contribute over $661 billion to the American economy. Right. Listen, I'm proud to advocate on behalf of Hispanic businessmen and women, but we never forget that first and foremost, to the point that was made earlier, we are Americans. Every job we create, every product we manufacture, every service we provide goes to benefit the American economy.
And you're a Hillary surrogate? You sound very reasonable this morning, I got to say. We are out of time, unfortunately. It is great to see all of you. No, I'm serious. That was great.
No, I think that's great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's do it. The race for the White House is a knockdown, drag-out fight to the finish, as you know, with under 70 days left. With the nominees going toe-to-toe on the trail until the voters make their final decision in November, unless we need overtime. And we're keeping score each week in the title boxing ring with former prize fighter himself, political analyst Ed Rollins, who actually was in the ring with Joe Frazier for a while. He also is the co-chairman of the Great American PAC, which is Donald Trump's super PAC. But you are not afraid of being critical for the other Republican nominee. Ed, welcome.
No, what I try and do is be constructive, and I think that's my obligation to the Fox audience, is to be constructive and tell what's actually going on.
But I will say this, my observation, you're much more excited about Donald Trump than you were about Mitt Romney.
Oh, no question about that. I think that Trump is connecting with ordinary blue-collar voters out there, and I think he's projecting real leadership, and he's getting stronger by the day.
But in August, he gave you mostly heartburn.
Yes, he did.
All right, ready for round one?
Yes.
Round one, the topic, immigration.
You don't build a coalition by insulting our friends or acting like a loose cannon. And it certainly takes more than trying to make up for a year of insults and insinuations by dropping in on our neighbors for a few hours and then flying home again. That is not how it works.
President Obama and Hillary Clinton support sanctuary cities. They support catch and release on the border. They support visa overstays. They support the release of dangerous criminals from detention. And they support unconstitutional executive amnesty.
And those are the two. Speaking yesterday and tweeting out later, Hillary Clinton said Trump just failed his first foreign policy test. Diplomacy isn't as easy as it looks. But I care what Ed Rollins thinks. Ed, what do you think?
I thought he had a great day. I thought he looked very strong. He obviously stood toe-to-toe with the president of Mexico. They exchanged ideas. Then his speech last night was a strong, tough speech. Her idea, we build coalitions, we do these kinds of things. That's why we're still in the same position we were when we came in 8 years ago under Obama.
The different tones didn't bother you?
No, I think the bottom line is that she basically is jabbing. Marcus of Queensberry rules. He's throwing haymakers, and he's landing them.
All right, he's my favorite, Marcus. Meanwhile, round two would be the African-American vote. Let's listen.
The policies of Hillary Clinton have produced only poverty, joblessness, failing schools, broken homes, and rising crime. And it's only getting worse. They don't care about you. Remember that.
From the start, Donald Trump has built his campaign on prejudice and paranoia. In just this past week, under the guise of outreach to African Americans, Trump has stood up in front of largely white audiences and described black communities in such insulting and ignorant terms.
I don't think it's insulting when you talk in terms of the crime that is occurring in the urban areas of America and trying to find solutions other than the Democrat solutions that have been there for 40 years. So I think that he made good points there. She, again, is just kind of the soft touch. His audience is whites, but it's not. He's not trying to attract just the black African-American vote. He's trying to show Americans he wants to solve problems.
Hopefully, and Saturday he's going to go to Detroit to show to a black audience that he cares.
And he wants to hear their side of the story.
Winner is?
Winner's Trump.
All right, round two goes to Trump. Round one went to Trump. When it comes to character, that's the focus of round three. Character.
Hillary Clinton thinks she's entitled to be president. She thinks she's above the law. So far, she's proven that. But the truth is, it's the opposite. Her criminal conduct at home and her failed interventions overseas simply make her unfit. She is unfit to serve in the Oval Office.
No one should have any illusions about what's really going on here. Now Trump is trying to rebrand himself as well. But don't be fooled. A few words on a teleprompter won't change that. He says he wants to make America great again, but more and more it seems as though his real message seems to be make America hate again.
The winner in character.
I don't think he's preaching hate. I think he's basically talking about the facts that every American who watches television realizes what's going on in the country. And I think, again, he wins this round. You know, she had a good line there, but it wasn't enough to win the round. Because I think the critical thing here is that she is not changing any policies that Obama did. The country desperately wants change. He is the agent of change.
You might hear spin from different areas, but it's hard to imagine a stronger week going into Labor Day than Donald Trump has. But Saturday might be his biggest.
It could. You know, it's going to end up the discussion. He is closed. Well, he's talking to blue-collar workers about serious problems. She's out in the Hamptons, being with rich guys raising lots of money.
Ed Rollins, 3 rounds. You have it a knockout this week.
This was the strongest week he's had since the convention.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to go see Hands of Stone together. The latest boxing movie out there. Roberto Duran.
Welcome back. Donald Trump talking about an issue you haven't heard a lot of politicians talk about: how to help or make immigrants assimilate to America once they are here in America. Is that a good idea? Is it possible?
And it might be through his new screening process, which he talks about. Let's ask Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach is back with us. He helped Donald Trump write his border plan. And, of course, it was delivered in its entirety last night. Chris, what stood out for you?
Oh, a number of things, but you hit one of the nails on the head right there with assimilation. I haven't heard a presidential candidate or a president talk about assimilation in our immigration system in a long time. And, you know, it's so important that we welcome immigrants here, but that's just the first half. You have to make people become American, and that's something we should not be ashamed of, adopting our values. And the way you do that is you control the numbers, for one thing. If they're just unremitting wave after wave without any pause, then there's no incentive for people to become American. You do things like the ideological screening that Donald Trump talked about, and another thing you have to do is make our schools, our public schools, the crucible of assimilation that they used to be in the past, but they're not anymore. So he's really digging deep in this speech, and it was just wonderful to hear.
But don't you have to believe in your own culture and your values in order to inculcate them into other people? And don't you have to put language at the center? I mean, our schools used to assimilate people by teaching them English.
Exactly.
We don't do that. Why?
That's exactly right. You know, if you have a multiculturalism ethic that is so strong that you're constantly repudiating American values, how in the world are you going to encourage newcomers to adopt those values? And so it's a big task, but we have a president who's now talking about it at least. That's really an important point of his speech.
Chris, he also, in a delicate way, because it could be a put-down, they talked about minority communities and protecting wages. For people here legally trying to work themselves up the system, they're being blown out of the workforce by people working underneath under the wire, so to speak.
Yeah, this was a really important part of the speech. He mentioned it 3 times, protecting the wages of American workers. If you look at every single industry where illegal immigration has come in and sort of swamped the workforce, wages have gone through the floor. That's hotel cleaning, that's meat packing plants, that's some aspects of construction. So what you've got to do if you want to protect those at the bottom of our economic ladder, which includes a lot of people who are themselves new immigrants of Hispanic ethnicity and African-American U.S. citizens, you've got to protect them from illegal competition so wages can go up. And Trump was hitting it. And you know, again, I haven't heard a president talk about this in my lifetime.
No, because it benefits the people who run everything, of course.
And of course, he thinks he hopes it helps him become president. Chris Kobach, thanks so much. Appreciate the inside story.
My pleasure.
All right, last night in Phoenix, Donald Trump revealing his 10-point immigration plan. The GOP nominee discussing building a Great Wall, ending catch and release, and have no tolerance for criminal aliens. Take a listen to this.
Zero tolerance for criminal aliens. Zero. You can call it whatever the hell you want. They're gone. Their days have run out in this country. The crime will stop. They're going to be gone. It will be over.
Trump also highlighting how Americans have been hurt by illegal immigrants. Trump has spoken many times in the past about Jamil Shaw, Jr., who was killed by an illegal immigrant just outside his home in L.A. Joining us now is his father, Jamil Shaw, Sr. Jamil, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
I understand you had a chance to listen and watch Donald Trump's speech last night. What did you make of his words?
Oh, yeah. Before I get started, I want to make one thing understood. I'm not a part of that organization. I'm a part of Jamil's Law organization, and I really enjoyed hearing from Donald Trump. I mean, it was very inspirational to me, you know, to hear some of the things that he wanted. We've been trying to get a law passed called Jamil's Law in L.A., more of a local law that says that if you're in the country illegal and you're in a gang, that's automatically deportable. So what he was saying was just spot on what we wanted, you know, secure communities, 287G, we want ICE rolling with the gang task forces, we want them going into the jails, going into the prisons, you know, just doing some, like Donald Trump say, some extreme vetting, you know, get in there and make us safe. We want to see it, you know, we didn't heard from forever, but Donald Trump, everyone knows he's going to do it. I feel that he's going to do it.
So clearly, Jamil, you like what you're hearing from Donald Trump, and I know we've spoken in the past, and you've liked all along what he has had to say. His critics say he's insensitive and that he's being racist, and that this isn't America, this isn't the way we behave in America. Well, how do you respond to his critics?
Well, how do we behave in America? Just sit around and let people murder our kids, you know, all our kids dead? You hear about being separated. I have to go to the cemetery just to see a picture of my son on a wall. So I don't, you know, I don't want to hear that kind of stuff. We know that we have gangs killing, we have murderers, we have rapists. These things are happening. I'm not saying Mexico personally sends them over, but we know they're here. And if we can't deal with that, we don't want to hear all this rhetoric. We want someone who's giving us solutions, has a plan, and is ready to implement it. I mean, that's what it's all about.
And yeah, Hillary Clinton not talking about it. I'm sure when she responds to the speech, she won't even mention any of the things you just talk about. She's just going to say, oh, he's so mean.
Jamil, to that point, has anyone from her campaign, has anyone from the Democratic Party ever reached out to you?
Oh, no, never. Only time I hear from them is when I'm a racist. I mean, I hear the same stuff. You know, they call me a racist, you know. I remember way back in 2008, Bill O'Reilly had asked Hillary Clinton about my son being murdered in a one-on-one interview, and he asked her about my son being shot dead in the streets in L.A. Would she stop sanctuary cities? She said no. So she can't say nothing to me. I was around in the 90s when they had these crime bills. I was a young guy then. I know everything they were doing, you know. So she can't fool me. She can't fool no black people.
And the other aspect that he has challenges on is his ability to implement this. You like what he's saying. You like his words. You like his ideas and his policies. How confident are you in his ability, if elected president, to actually implement these ideas?
You know, it's all about trying. We've heard from every Republican, give us the House, we'll take care of you. Give us the Senate. You know, we've heard that before. Trump has my hopes and my dreams, you know. I feel that he's going to do what he say, and if nothing else, he's going to try. He's going to try to implement these things. There's some things he can do on his own, and there's some he's going to need Congress. But as long as he goes in there and represents the American people, I'm very happy. I'll let him roll with everything else.
Hi, Jamil. It's Kevin Kelly. My question to you is, should this not pass, that Jamil's Law not pass in Los Angeles, do you think you could go to Donald Trump, and would you want to see it pass on a federal level where gang members in any city, including Chicago, should they be legal, be deported?
Oh, definitely. I remember when I met with Donald Trump a while back, I had gave him the Jamil's Law, the whole thing, so he could see it, look at it. You know, I was hoping that he implemented it into his immigration plans. And it's pretty much Jamil's Law is there. You know, whenever I hear Trump talking about what he's going to do, I'm hearing Jamil's Law. Now, if they want to call it that or don't, it doesn't matter. I just want the enforcement. I want to get involved in it. I have people in L.A. that if he gets in there, we're going to help out. You know, this is about America. I have kids. I have grandkids. I have nieces and nephews. When I'm dead, I want to leave something for them, not just funerals.
So, Jamil, to remind everybody, this was back in 2008 when your son was 19 years old at the time.
17
years old at the time. When he was shot by this illegal immigrant, in what specific way did Donald Trump lay out his plan last night to make you think that it would have prevented the death of your son? And when that happened several years ago?
Oh, the first thing, bringing secure communities back. You know, 287G. This allows the sheriffs and the police and ICE to go into the jails. I mean, that's where the bad ones are. They're in jail. Some of them on the street, but the ones in jail, there is no reason why they have people getting out of jail killing our kids. That's unacceptable. You know, letting the ICE go with the law enforcement too on gang task forces. You know, everything that he wants to do when it comes to enforcement of criminals. Everybody should be for that. Who could be against that? And if you are, what would you do if someone murdered your child, ran your daddy over? I mean, what would you do?
Yeah, the shooter had already been in jail, got out, no one checked. I don't see how that's still happening so often that nobody's looking into this. It seems pretty basic and not controversial.
There was outrage over his idea that if you're an illegal immigrant and you get arrested, you immediately get deported, even before a trial, even before you're charged. But the point is that if you're an illegal immigrant, you're violating the law in the first place. That's the crime. Exactly, Jamil.
Just being here. Once you cross the border, all bets off. That has to be dealt with. If that's not dealt with, then they're all going to be here. So at the border, you catch them, you deal with them, you punish them, you let their friends hear about it to where they don't want to come back. You put out a directive, you put out a public announcement that we're enforcing this now. The past is the past. Today, we're enforcing it, and Trump is going to do it. I believe it.
All right, Jamil, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on that. All right, Jamil Shah, thank you. Donald Trump offering up plenty of red meat for his base last night. I found this speech difficult to walk away from. You just didn't know what was coming around the corner, and it was scripted, but he was ad-libbing. What did you get? What was your big takeaway?
What a day. Going to Mexico, which was a brilliant political move, and I think a brilliant move in a lot of ways, to help really reset the campaign. But then he ended the day with something that's a little more typical, big, high-energy rally. So we talked about immigration for a full day. I thought it was a compelling speech, but I did think the trip earlier that day was the news of the day. It really did reset the race in a lot of ways, I think.
I mean, what about some of these ad-libs, though? Well, Mexico's going to pay for this wall. They don't know it yet.
We should deport Hillary Clinton. That was a good one.
That was a good one, too. Maybe they'll deport her, too, he added in. But
there was much made, though, on Twitter initially about what he said about we didn't discuss paying for the wall. And then the president said, well, I told Trump I wasn't paying for the wall. And everybody was trying to make it out like Donald Trump wasn't telling the truth.
That's right.
But this morning, if you look at the mainstream media, the way they're covering it, they're not really playing it that way. Because he said, we didn't discuss it. And if the president just says to him, I'm not doing it, that's not really a discussion. I don't think that's what got play. That speech got play because he was pretty clear now. He cleared up any idea that he feels like it's okay if illegal immigrants stay in this country.
Well,
I thought that was the critical point of that speech last night.
And maybe you want to touch base on this, because I thought he was actually pretty presidential when he was talking about the wall, and he was actually talking about borders with the president, because he actually brought up they have a border problem of immigrants coming up through Mexico. So do you want to touch base on that?
Yeah, so basically I do think that the meeting with the president of Mexico was a brilliant stroke. I do think it is no surprise to anybody that there was a disagreement, Dagan, between Mexico and Donald Trump on who's going to pay for this wall and whether or not there should be a wall. I think everyone kind of gets that. But you can't erase the moment. It was a fantastic moment where I think he did look presidential. The question on what we're going to do with people who are here, you know, someone who worked for President George W. Bush, President Bush was considered more moderate in immigration, and he said every single person who's here illegally, in order to ever get legal status, they had to go back to their home country. They had to leave this country and go home. People don't talk about it now in this context. You have this whole conversation. A lot of people on the left immediately said, oh, this is race baiting. Trump is a racist. This is bad policy. It's policy that's been accepted by a lot of Republicans and people in the middle for a long time, which is, yeah, there are a lot of people who we need for economic reasons in our economy. Maybe it should be done through a guest worker program. Maybe we should have more people become citizens. But it's got to start with acknowledging they broke the law and they have to go home to start the process
process to make it right again.
Right, and that's a hardline stance. Do you think that more people kind of support it than even the ones that are saying that they do? Because
I don't think it's that hard line. It's, from my standpoint, I think it's characterized because Trump's language is so tough.
Exactly, the way that it's portrayed.
Right.
A lot of people say, yeah, they're kind of secretly maybe agree, but they don't want to come out and say it because it sounds controversial.
But when George W. Bush ran for re-election in 2004 on the idea that everybody had to go home, and he was considered somebody, a former Texas governor, very popular in the Hispanic community, got over 40% of Hispanic vote.
44 in 2004.
That's right. So the policy, if we get out of the words, which I know is hard for some people to do, and you start looking at the policies, this is a policy we can start to build some consensus.
I think the messaging that I've heard watching the response, the conservative response to the speech is, stop, the liberals and Democrats talk about illegal immigrants as the victims. Stop talking about that. This is about the laws of the United States and the citizens of this country. I just thought that was a interesting way to frame it that certainly resonates politically.
So I do want to get real quick, if we can, get that tweet up before we move on to Hillary Clinton. This was the reaction on Twitter from the Mexican president. He tweeted out, at the beginning of the conversation with Donald Trump, I made clear that Mexico will not pay for that wall. So to Dagan's point, that continues to be the back and forth in the conversation this morning, because it does seem like we heard one thing from him and another thing from Donald Trump. Joining me now is Javier Palomares, President and CEO of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and Steve Cortez, National Hispanic Advisory Council for Donald Trump. Steve, I want to go to you first. What did you make of Trump's comments last night, and is this going to work for him? Is this going to be a turning point in his campaign?
Well, Sandra, I think what he's doing is working, and certainly the polls show that. You're on the Fox News poll shows that. When we look at Reuters, he was at a 12-point disadvantage just a couple of weeks ago. He's now tied in the polls. So I think what he's doing is working. What I think he did yesterday is he acted incredibly presidential. He went to Mexico City. He met with a world leader, one who, by the way, had formerly castigated him, who had compared him to Hitler and Mussolini, yet he reached out to him and said, we can negotiate as allies and friends. We can find common ground. The U.S. and Mexico have a common future as neighbors, as allies, as trade partners. So, and then he went to Arizona and he spoke to Americans and said, listen, I will always have your back. It will always be America first. We love immigration, but immigration must be done by the rules. And it's the people who are most harmed by illegal immigration, by the way, are legal immigrants, are people who went through what is often a very cumbersome process. People like my father who did it right, who got visas, who got citizenship, who became naturalized, and it is completely, patently unfair to them in every way to say that people can then cheat the system and cut the line in front of them.
Let me just tell you, that speech last night, Dagan and I were chatting. I mean, it was late. We had to get up early. It was a compelling speech. It was, it was attention-grabbing, and he really doubled down on his immigration plan and gave more specifics. Let's listen to some of that from last night before we get to Javier.
Zero tolerance for criminal aliens. Zero. You can call it whatever the hell you want. They're gone. Their days have run out in this country. The crime will stop. They're going to be gone. It will be over.
So, what did you make of it, Javier?
Well, I think it was a compelling speech that played well to his base, no doubt. The problem, the challenge that Donald has in front of him is he's got to grow that base. He's got to reach a higher percentage of the Hispanic vote.
Do you think he did that last night?
No, he did not.
Why? Where did he fail?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the story hasn't changed. He did get some more specifics into the speech. I certainly agree with that. But the reality of it is, listen, immigration reform is important. The immigration system is broken. Nobody's arguing about that. But you don't fix it by going down and having a chat with the president of Mexico, coming back and getting your base all fired up.
Isn't that better than not going down to talk to him?
That works for the base. That works for the base. But this system has been broken over decades. It's not going to get fixed in one conversation. That's the beginning and the end of it. So, building a wall is a great thing, but that doesn't solve the problem. 42% of illegal immigrants get here by flying into the United States. A wall is not going to change that. We need to get beyond the rhetoric and get down to what actually will fix the problem.
Do you like anything that Hillary Clinton is saying?
You know, Hillary's got her own issues to deal with in terms of immigration reform. Immigration in this nation is broken. Nobody is arguing that point. But you don't fix it by hyperbole. You don't fix it by shenanigans. You fix it like John Kasich and Jeb Bush and even Marco Rubio were trying to approach it in a more compassionate and strategic fashion. This is an important relationship that must exist with Mexico. $600 billion of bilateral trade, 6 million American jobs depend on this issue. You can't fix this issue. You can't fix this broken immigration system by hyperbole. It simply doesn't work that way.
But, I mean, Steve, we just had the father of a son who was killed by an illegal immigrant who said, listen, I have to have confidence that Donald Trump's plan will work. I have to, because he's the only one saying the right thing. He's the only one in his words, Steve.
No, and Senator, listen, it's important for our national security that we control our border. It's important for our economic security because American workers, particularly, by the way, legal Hispanics, African Americans, they should not have to compete in the labor market with illegals who almost always are willing to work for lower wages because of their status. And, you know, I want to speak as a campaign, and personally, I want to speak much more to legal Hispanic Americans, whether they're immigrants or the descendants of immigrants. And I think that they have been taken for granted by the Democratic Party. Most people of color have been taken for granted by the Democratic Party and are not doing very well, by the way, in this economic expansion, in this very slow expansion. People of color are going backwards, unfortunately, economically. They live in unsafe neighborhoods largely. They largely attend failing schools. I hope that Donald Trump, and I believe that Donald Trump is appealing very effectively to those people, saying the Democrats take you for granted. Please give us a chance. We have ideas and policies that can grow your communities in every way, in safety and prosperity. So that's where I really want to focus, and I believe Donald Trump will focus in these next 70 days left in this election.
And as far as the Donald Trump softening stance, which he used that word last week, a lot of people were expecting going into the speech last night to have him back down from some of his controversial stances on illegal immigrants and immigration. He did not. So what are you hearing this morning? What is the response of the Hispanic community?
Well, you know, we represent 4.1 million Hispanic-owned firms in this country that collectively contribute over $661 billion to the American economy. First and foremost, immigration reform is important to my constituency. It is not the top issue. It is not the only issue. There are so many other things that we want to hear from both candidates. We want to hear about how they're going to help American businesses move forward, small businesses gain access to capital and credit when we need it. We want to find out what both candidates think about international trade. 94% of the global market exists outside of the United States. These are the issues that we need to hear about. So based on
what Trump said last night, what would that do to the U.S. economy?
Absolutely nothing at this point. Building a wall is not going to fix our woes. We need to move the world's greatest economy needs to move forward, and fixing a wall, putting up a wall is not going to, first of all, it's not going to fix immigration. It's not going to fix illegal immigration. Again, 42% of all illegal immigrants in this country arrived on a plane.
But a lot of the liberals that you'll hear in response to the speech and Democrats, they say that if you start deporting illegal immigrants en masse, which, by the way, President Obama's done in record numbers.
Absolutely.
In record numbers.
More so than every president before him.
Right. Although it's slowed in recent years, if you start doing that, it's going to crater our economy. Do you buy that?
I don't know that it'll crater it. It's not going to help it. The fact of the matter is, this is a dragon that's been created so that Donald Trump could slay it. These are not the only issues we need to deal with. This economy needs help. And American business has spoken loudly. Donald Trump is not dealing with those issues.
Last word to you.
Javier, no, I would just say I think you and I would agree on far more than we disagree. And I think you would agree, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you would agree with me that to Hispanic Americans who are here legally, which is a massive community, again, whether they're immigrants or descendants, to Hispanic Americans, I think what really matters is we need school choice. We need tax reform. We need regulatory reform. We need to get growing again. We can't tolerate 1% growth in this country. Hispanic Americans, sadly, have 1/10 the household wealth of white Americans. And that's a tragedy. It's not because they don't work hard. They work incredibly hard. It's because of bad policy. And I think Donald Trump is offering some serious answers to that dilemma.
All right. And joining me now is Trump campaign senior economic advisor David Malpass is here. Good morning to you, David.
Hi, Sandra. Good morning.
All right, so let's get right to the meat of this. Cook said he would fight to overturn the ruling because it has not based in law or fact. Where do you think this is going?
Well, we know there's going to be fights all over the world between big government and they're trying to get revenue. So the European Union is going to fight. I don't know the law on Ireland, but we're talking about a lot of money, so that makes everybody pay attention. But I think the bigger picture issue here, and it applies to the U.S., it was involved in Brexit, is people are trying to push back against big government. So the European Union desperately wants more money because it's going to try to spend it. Same is going on in the U.S. The tax rates are just too high. So Trump is proposing a big cut in business taxes so they don't have to spend so much time fighting around the world. You know, a lot of CEOs just spend all their time fighting about taxes around the world. That's not what we need.
Should Donald Trump reach out to Tim Cook, who's calling this total political crap? Does he ever pick up the phone and call these guys?
You know, they all talk, but the reality of this is that you've got to see that Obama is going to China here this weekend to talk about big government. Hillary Clinton is part of the globalism direction that the world is heading. So what Trump is spending a lot of time doing is just explaining we don't have to go that way. We can go toward lower rates and we can have more production out of the U.S.
But David, let me point out one thing. In this new Fox News poll, Trump throughout this race has been crushing Hillary Clinton when it comes to who do you trust to do a better job on the economy. And this latest poll, he is in a dead heat with her. Look at that, 48% to 48%. He had a 53% to 41% advantage in May. What is he doing wrong? That's his wheelhouse. That's his strong suit, and he's handing it over to her.
You know, I think those can be improved a lot by talking about it. Trump's plan is much better than Clinton's plan. She wants higher tax rates. He wants lower tax rates. She wants more regulation. He wants regulations that are effective and a whole government that works in a more effective way. And that story hasn't been told enough. I think it can be told more. I've got an article in the New York Times this morning saying that as people look at Trump's plan, they're going to see that there will be more jobs for them, for their friends, for their children.
So, David, last question. Fox News also polling people on whether or not they think Trump is hiding something by not releasing his tax returns. 60% said yes. 35% no. Should he release those, and will he?
You know, that's a diversion to me. He said that he's under audit and not releasing them. So the diversion is the country is really hurting, and we're seeing it in Europe as well. The Brexit vote was people saying we don't want to be controlled by big government. That's the same story in the U.S., so I think we should be talking about that.
Is he ready to answer that in the debate, though, because she's going to push him on what his effective tax rate was and how much he gave to charity? And he should be able to answer that whether he releases those returns or not.
I think the right answer, though, is he's created a giant amount of wealth and prosperity in New York and can do that in the nation with better policies. And Clinton's just worked for the government.
Okay. David Malpass, always good to have you here.
Good to be here.
All right. Thank you, sir. A new Fox News poll finds that Donald Trump is shaving Hillary Clinton's lead. In a four-way race, Hillary Clinton maintains a narrow 2-point advantage over the Republican nominee, which falls within the margin of error. The dead heat calls into question critics who say that Donald Trump has no chance of reclaiming the lead. Here to break it all down is University of Virginia Center for Politics Director Larry Sabato. Larry, good to see you here this morning. All right, so
thank you.
Speak to Trump supporters who may be listening right now. Is this good news that we're revealing in this latest poll? Is he trending higher?
Not particularly. And you've got to, first of all, you're cherry picking. You can't do that with polls. You have to look at a polling average. She's up about 5 when you put all the polls together. Number two, you're presenting the four-way matchup. That's legitimate, but the much more legitimate matchup is head-to-head.
Okay, where he's at about 8 point, still about an 8-point lead. She's at an 8-point lead there.
48 to 42. It's a 6-point lead for Hillary Clinton, 48 to 42 in the one-on-one matchup. The reason that's more representative is because the third-party candidates tend to fade as November approaches.
Okay, so we're showing the latest Fox News polling with the 6-point lead that you're acknowledging, Clinton 48, Trump 42. It also finds that Trump has an advantage with independent voters, which has been key in this race, Larry. Could that change the race in some swing states when you look at how independent voters are trending right now? 38% Donald Trump, 26% Hillary Clinton.
Well, Possibly. It depends on how you're defining independents. Real independents are actually single-digit percentage of the electorate. There are not very many of them. Almost everybody leans to a party one way or the other.
Larry, it's Dagan McDowell, and hello to the fine people of Charlottesville, Virginia.
Thank you.
In terms of these polls, what's the most troubling for Donald Trump? Just looking in this Fox News poll, he still only has 74% of Republican voters. Is that the most worrisome thing that you could look at before we move on to the swing states? 81% of Democrats back Hillary Clinton.
Yes, I think, frankly, that's a little low on both sides. Again, if you use polling averages, Clinton is close to 90% support among Democrats, whereas Donald Trump is a little over 80% with Republicans. He needs to get that number up. Who's he missing? We already know. He's missing the moderate conservatives. He's missing the independents who lean Republican. They still believe he's unqualified to be president and does not have the temperament to be president. That is Donald Trump's challenge. And I don't think yesterday proved anything to them. He's going to have to try and do that in the debates.
Oh, speaking of the debates,
I can't wait.
Kat can't wait for that. But Larry, let's talk right now about your electoral vote predictions. You predict that the swing states of Florida, Iowa, Pennsylvania, even Wisconsin could lead Democrat. Do you think independent voters, as we had just looked at the polling there, could change that?
Well, I'll tell you where Clinton is weakest on that map, even though she has those states leaning to her. She's weakest in Iowa, Nevada, in Florida. And I suppose you could throw Ohio in, though I haven't seen much to make me question that it's leaning to Clinton. But those states are obviously critical states. And if we see states switch, I think those would be the first to switch.
Nevada, how is she weak in that state, Larry, particularly with the large Latino voting population there?
Well, you have to look at the other side of the equation, not just Latinos, but also white registered voters there. Nevada has been through perhaps the worst recession of the 50 states, or certainly one of the few that are in that category. And because of that, because it's taken so long for Nevada to recover, there's a lot more feeling for change. There's a lot more desire for change. So I think that's really at the heart of it. And also, you have to look at the population of college-educated voters, and it's relatively low there versus some other states.
But you know what could change everything, Kat, is the debate.
I know.
I know you can't wait to talk about that.
I really can't
the first
wait.
Debate.
Hillary, I mean, polls can say one thing, but the head-to-head, she can talk about him and say, oh, he's mean, in her own speeches that have been written and prepared by somebody else. But when they're face-to-face and she's forced to handle Donald Trump, never knowing what he's going to say or do, I'm really going to be interested to see how that affects things.
And Larry, how have the debates affected the outcome in November? Is there one political season or one election year that it changed everything?
Well, I'd cite 1960 when they started between Kennedy and Nixon. Nixon probably would have been president in 1960 without the 4 televised debates. You can argue that a debate cost Gerald Ford a 4-year term in 1976 when he made a gaffe, a goof, during one of the debates and then kind of refused to correct it for about 10 days, which is never a wise thing. But I got to tell you, recently, because we're more used to debates and the candidates are trained so much more thoroughly for the debates, you don't see that kind of thing very often. We live in a very polarized era, and so Democrats tune in to cheer for their team, and Republicans tune in to cheer for their team, and you actually have just a handful of truly undecided voters watching a debate.
All right, so Larry, let's talk the timing now, because we're just over 2 months away from Election Day. Is there time for any major turnaround or time for Hillary Clinton to lose a lot of ground? I don't know. I mean, Reince Priebus had said that Labor Day was going to be the day where Donald Trump would then be leading in the polls. I mean, that's Monday. It's not exactly happening right now. Do they still have time?
Well, they do if certain things happen, external things. You know, at this time in 2008, and you all on the Business Channel would know this better than anyone, at this time in 2008 when Obama and McCain were opposing one another, nobody knew what was going to happen at the end of September when the economy nearly collapsed. So, you know, there are surprises that do happen and that transform elections. That's why we watch every day. Every day? How about every hour? Every minute? I can't wait till this is over. I want to resume a life.
I still think that what lost it for John McCain, it wasn't Sarah Palin, it wasn't the collapse of Lehman Brothers. It was when he said, I'm suspending my presidential campaign. I'm going back to Washington, D.C. to fix it. And then he ended up sitting in a corner, and it was Hank Paulson and Nancy Pelosi side by side rubbing elbows, you know, proclaiming that they had saved the U.S. economy.
Yeah, he was kind of not a participant. He was a spectator rather than somebody in the center of the action. I'm not sure why they did it that way. He would have been better off actually denouncing the incumbent Republican administration and saying he would do things completely differently.
And as far as this polling, it's important to point that on the issues, Trump more voters trust Clinton than Trump on terrorism. She's still got a 3-point lead there. And the two candidates are tied on their handling of the economy.
Which is a big switch.
Which is a big switch. Larry, and you mentioned 2008 and the unpredictable nature of that election and what was happening in those days and months that led up to that. We were just looking at that September to October period for the U.S. stock market. Typically, that is not a good time for the stock market, but the stock market got hit 25% in the September-October leading up to the 2008 election day. Unbelievable to look back at that time and think of that. Larry Sabato, thanks for joining us this morning.
It was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, good to have you. Joining us now is former White House press secretary under President George W. Bush, Ari Fleischer, and he's joining us in-house this morning. Good to have you here.
Good morning.
All right, so a lot of people talking about that big speech last night. We were kind of joking. We had to get up early. But it was a compelling speech. He was full of energy. I mean, he really got into specifics about his deportation plan. He said he's going to build that Great Wall along the southern border. It was a passionate speech.
Oh, it was passionate, but I'm afraid it also narrowed his path to the presidency. Look, Donald Trump's biggest problem is college graduates and college-educated women in this country. It's not Hispanics, it's not African Americans. Let me just stipulate he's going to get Mitt Romney-like bottom-of-the-barrel numbers among Hispanics, about 25–27%, which means his only path to the presidency is to have a huge white vote. And it's just not turning out for him right now. He's getting Mitt Romney-like numbers among non-college educated whites. Mitt Romney won by 18 points. Trump is up by 19 points among non-college educated whites.
I mean, there's a big difference
here. That audience in the room last night is not enough for him to win.
Okay, but let's talk about this action, this effort that he just went through to go down to Mexico, meet with the Mexican president, talk about that wall. He says they don't know they're going to pay for it, but they are. But talking about in his speech, clarifying his immigration positions, talking specifically about his plans to deport the illegal immigrants that are currently in this country. He said he was softening his stance, but then he sort of doubled down on his original approach last night.
I think his path to the presidency is much more the visit to Mexico. It's that presidential image. It's cutting through the bombast of Donald Trump to being a more perceived as thoughtful leader, some of the American people can actually see in the Oval Office. The problem I have with his proposals last night is when you say you're going to tell every single person in America who came here illegally, you need to get out of the country, you are turning off so many people who could vote Republican. And it's just not practical. It's not going to happen. You know, I met somebody last night from East Europe. He's a waiter at the restaurant I was at. He said, Donald Trump doesn't want me in this country. This is somebody from East Europe. He's not even affected by the wall. That's the image Donald Trump is projecting to many people who want to be Americans.
The kind of police state that you'd have to actually do something like that isn't really very conservative, which is more of the issue that I have with that kind of thing.
Okay, so but talking about his image and whether or not this is a man that's presidential enough to be the president, that has been a criticism. But did he look more presidential than you've seen him last night on that stage?
You know, the speech last night, less so. You know, it was detail-oriented, it was specific, and I will credit him for coming out with abundance of policies in that speech, far more than you've heard from Hillary in any of her speeches on immigration, and that's to Trump's credit. But the policies themselves, in my opinion, go too far.
Well, but he had nowhere to go, though, Ari. Right, because that was roughly where he started in terms of his immigration policy, and that was his base. So he got into this situation where he risked potentially losing his base if he waffled too much. Yeah?
And that's my point, though, about he's narrowed his path to the presidency. That base in and of itself can win a primary. What we saw with Mitt Romney is it's almost impossible to win a general election, and Donald Trump's going to do worse than Mitt Romney among Hispanics. So therefore, he has to have such a higher percentage of white voters, and it's not happening yet.
All right. So from Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton, we've got this newest revelation surrounding the Clinton email scandal. Documents obtained by the Republican National Committee showed the Democratic nominee kept sending classified material on her personal email after her term as Secretary of State ended. Ari, it just seems like every day there's something new, but it's just more. You know, I don't know. Republicans can't really make their case when it comes to really very clear evidence on lack of judgment on her part.
Yeah, they can make the case, and I think Donald Trump just has to shorten it and define it better. Number one, she converted government property into personal property. You can't do that. Number two, she endangered our national security because she exposed America's secrets to China and Russia and Iran. And three, the very judgment of somebody who would do this. Why? So she could circumvent all transparency laws. You know, this is a character flaw, and we've seen it with Hillary Clinton throughout her career. There's a lot here for Donald Trump to go after. It's not the emails in and of themselves. It's the behavior and the pattern.
Well, if going after her on this, though, isn't enough to broaden his path rather than narrowing it? Well, is that enough to offset what your criticism of the speech last night?
It is, Faye. So one of the reasons Donald Trump still has a chance is because Hillary is so weak. And the primary reason she's so weak is most people don't think she's honest or trustworthy. All of this reinforces it. But what Republicans and Donald Trump particularly have to do is just be more specific about what's wrong. You know, when Republicans just say Benghazi, our base reacts, but most American people go, what does that mean? You have to be specific about what the wrongdoing was, and that's what he has to do at a deeper level, and you'll have to watch this in debate.
It is more complicated than her just getting to say, oh, Trump's a racist, Trump's a jerk. It is more complicated, which I think kind of makes it more difficult to do.
Well, I think the narrative for Donald Trump to portray is that Hillary Clinton has run in the best interest of herself and not in the best interest of her country, and she's consistently done that over and over and over again, and she consistently will lie about it, and she's actually not being held accountable while other people are being held accountable to the laws. But he hasn't come across that narrative. I haven't seen it come across from Donald Trump.
All right, so let's talk polling because we have this latest Fox News polling out showing Hillary Clinton's lead over Donald Trump has narrowed. She now has 48% support to his 42% among registered voters. Ari, the poll also focusing on who voters trust the most, which has obviously been a big question in this election. Terrorism and the economy. Clinton holds a slight lead on terror, while the two candidates are tied on the economy. Your take on that?
And in a four-way race, it's just a 2-point difference between Trump and Clinton. Look, here's what you have to worry about if you're a Democrat. When Donald Trump stops hurting himself, when he stops criticizing American citizens, calling them Mexicans in the case of the judge from Indiana, or going after the Khan family, when he doesn't do it, this race starts to resettle into a very close race between him and Hillary. So if Trump would only stop making mistakes, he has a chance.
Wait, hold on. I thought we just started this whole interview with you by saying that there's like
I said he narrowed his path, but he has a chance, and he has a chance because Hillary is so weak.
All right, so
That's
be clear. What is his path
race.
to victory at this point? It is September 1st.
Yeah, I think it's simple. He needs to be less bombastic and more thoughtful. The trip to Mexico. If people see him in that presidential light, if they say, I can see him sitting in the Oval Office, it doesn't scare me. He can beat Hillary.
Is that
He's got to be more thoughtful.
How unprecedented was that when he did stand at that podium next to the Mexican president yesterday, and everybody said, wow, what a presidential moment for Donald Trump. I mean, have we seen that before?
I can only imagine how furious the Democratic Party in this country is at the Mexican government. How could you give him that stage? Why did you allow him to do that?
And now Hillary has to play follow the leader, right? I mean, because Donald went down there, and now she has to go down there.
He's given more press conferences in Mexico than she has anywhere this year.
He had three-quarters of a really good day yesterday. He had a three-quarter good day when he went to Mexico, and I think, frankly, he lost some ground last night in his speech.
Wow. Because that's contrary, to what most people are saying this morning, that was a good... We're about to talk to Stuart Varney from Fox Business Network, who's going to say that was a good moment for Donald Trump.
I come from the Republican wing, that's a George W. Bush wing, that wants a solution on immigration reform and believes in compromise. I recognize I'm out of step with the base of the party on that. But I also recognize the base of the party will never win a national election again if this is all we're known for.
Wow. All right, strong words.
And he's tied with her in terms of who would do a better job with the economy, which is a dramatic change since May. And again, that's about his messaging, because he has the ability to message that properly and say, hey, if you're not happy with this country's direction.
But you know, last Friday we got the second revision on GDP, and it showed 1.1% growth. You never heard about it from Donald Trump. He was talking about other issues.
Fair point. All right.
Fair point.
Ari Fleischer, thank you for being here. Good stuff.